Hello, and welcome back to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and today we're going to talk about what that means. Now, the ontology part hopefully makes sense to you at this point. If not, I'll drop down in the description below a link to the video series on what ontology is. But we're going to talk about the philosophy part of my intro today. As a philosopher and someone who's really interested in making more philosophy-based content, I figure I should start with what is philosophy. It's a notoriously tricky one. It's really hard to answer. I'm going to do the best I can in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a much better idea of what philosophy is, what its major subdisciplines are. For a given question, how can you tell whether that question is a philosophical question or not, and then have an idea about how you could pursue philosophy more yourself. Let's start out with the lexical definitions. If we want a dictionary definition of philosophy, I'm going to go first and foremost to some of my major textbooks, and the one I have ready at hand, because I was doing this video and also because it sits on the bookshelf behind me and most of these other talks, Elliot Sober's Core Questions in Philosophy. And Elliot starts defining philosophy by first noting that the common use of the term philosophy. You might just go up to someone and be like, hey, what's your philosophy? We might say this of some athlete, right? What's your philosophy? And they say, oh, the best player is the one that wins the most championships. Or if you ask someone what's their philosophy, they might say, oh, I believe that God exists and he gives meaning to my life. And rather than dismiss those as not being issues of philosophy, Eliot says that's essentially right. Those are core issues, right? Core things at kind of the center of your life. And then he goes on to define philosophy by the sorts of assumptions that we make about those core issues. And he says that philosophy is the effort to help us identify these major assumptions and evaluate them. What does philosophy do on Eliot's view? There are these core questions, and we have a bunch of assumptions and sort of unreflected things related to them, and philosophy helps us get at those issues and assumptions. Another place to look, from Bratman, Perry, and Fisher. I'll link to both these books down in the description below as well. And they define philosophy as such. Philosophy means thinking as hard and as clearly as one can about some of the most interesting and enduring problems that human minds have ever encountered. So again, some commonality there. We're thinking hard, we're thinking clearly, and these problems have to be big, interesting, and enduring. And I'll go ahead and give my own definition. I don't have a textbook, not yet. Textbook publishers reach out to me, but I say the following: philosophy is the pursuit of truth through careful and clear thinking and limited observation, particularly within the academic history of philosophy. I de-emphasize observation a little bit because more observation-based thinking might be more of the natural sciences. And the other thing that's important in my definition is this caveat about the academic history of philosophy. Because if we are really serious about what philosophy means, it's changed over time. Back with the Greeks and sort of the invention of the academy, everything was philosophy. If you wanted to do mathematics or politics, all of those things would be studied at the academy, and all of them would sit under philosophy. But then, post Hellenism and the Roman period and then the medieval period, the academic sphere grows and changes and fractures, and a new taxonomy develops. And what you see today, philosophy is a subset of the university. You'll notice we still have PhDs for disciplines that aren't strictly philosophy, right? So there's sort of that remnant in the way that we talk about things. But if you describe yourself as a philosopher today, like I'm an academic philosopher, it probably means you studied one of the modern existing disciplines or subdisciplines of philosophy. So let's go ahead and lay those out. Those are metaphysics. Metaphysics is essentially big questions about what exists in the nature of reality. So the things that exist, the study of what exists, is ontology, which is a very important topic for this channel. And you'd be interested in how do those objects, how do those things that exist relate to themselves and one another. Another issue is epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge and belief, and that often goes hand in hand with metaphysics. We talk about M&E for metaphysics and epistemology, and you say, what are the things that you know? What are the things that you believe? How is knowledge generated and justified? When you get new evidence, how should you change your beliefs? Then we have logic. Logic is the study of reasoning. So we know some things that are true, and what follows from those things that are true. How can we construct arguments that are valid or strong What are bad arguments? Are there common patterns of reasoning that are acceptable or unacceptable? That all falls under the purview of logic. Then we have ethics. Ethics is fundamentally answering the question, how should I act? Is it okay to lie? Are there any situations in which it's okay to kill someone? What is the good? Do I have to follow rules? There are so many other subdisciplines. Those are the 4 that I'm probably going to focus on the most in this channel, so stay tuned for some follow-up videos on these where I dive into them a little more deeply and especially link them to how they're related to artificial intelligence and ontology in particular. But if I wanted to list some more, we could talk about the philosophy of science or aesthetics or political philosophy, the philosophy of mathematics or the philosophy of minds. Philosophy of mind is also really relevant in artificial intelligence. So a ton of other disciplines and subdisciplines here. We're only scratching the surface, but hopefully by looking at some of those questions, you now have a little bit better of an idea of what things are under the umbrella of philosophy. And philosophy is the set of big questions and methods that unify those all together. And they also fit within this particular historical academic tradition. Okay, so maybe you have some topic that you're thinking about and you want to know, does this count as philosophy? Here are 5 heuristics you can apply to see if the thing you're thinking about would count as philosophy. First, does it fall into one of the major umbrellas listed above? If it does, it's probably philosophy. If you say, oh, my question is about what should I believe, that's epistemology, that's a philosophical topic. Second, are you focused on the clarity of your ideas and providing definitions? A sign of philosophy, and particularly analytic philosophy, is that we're really interested in providing clear sets of necessary and sufficient conditions so that we can delineate the boundary of concepts and ideas. Third sign of philosophy, it's focusing on something that's general or more abstract. What is the nature of friendship such that the way this person behaved feels like it's a violation? Or what is the nature of love, right? We sort of take specific instances and then we abstract away from them for more general principles about big and central issues. And that's the 4th heuristic. Is the question or issue really big or important? This was something that we saw in that Perry and Bratman and Fisher definition as well. Is an enduring question, something that people have been asking for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not more. And then lastly, and this is sort of a negative heuristic, is the question that you have, is that something that can be answered just by observation? So if my question was, do most Americans think that friendship is important? Well, the importance of friendship is a central and enduring question. That's something that Plato discussed. Maybe this does feel like it's got a philosophical view, but the question there is just, how do most Americans feel about this? And that's just a matter that can be settled by some sort of poll, right? And that doesn't have the sense of philosophy about it. These measurable, observable things are typically not in the purview of what modern philosophy consists in. Okay. Lastly, let's say, okay, I'm a little intrigued by philosophy. You're watching this video. How can you yourself engage in philosophy? So I think of philosophy as an activity more than I think of it as sort of a set of rules and things, right? That's why the lexical definitions, while useful, I don't think fully capture what it is. If I wanted to tell you what baseball is, I wouldn't just say, okay, well, it's a 9-inning sport involving bats and balls. No, I'd have you watch a game and I'd have you play a game, right? To play it is to know what baseball is. And similarly, the way to understand what philosophy is to engage in it, to engage in discussion, to do it. So here are 6 suggestions, practical things that you can go do that will help you engage with philosophy and thereby get a better sense of what it is. First, most importantly, like and subscribe to this channel. We'll be doing more philosophy content. Your support really helps me, makes me excited and happy. Second, watch other channels. Consume other content that is philosophically minded. So, by the way, first and second, these are just low-hanging fruit that are easy. They're not actually the most important. Most important's later on. But I'll links to some of these down in the description below. But like Jared Henderson's channel, he and I worked as ontologists together. I respect him as a both content creator and philosopher. Crash Course Philosophy has some really good content as well. I'll link to those. The third thing that you can do is look for talks by philosophers and watch them, listen to them, consume them. And this is really nice because you can look for philosophers that have some notoriety behind them. So look at major universities, see who their best philosophers are. Look at major conferences like the American Philosophical Association. Look for keynote speakers, right? So go someplace where you would expect the speaker to be good, look at their content. That's a great place to consume stuff that you can have a reasonable expectation that it's good philosophy, right? Contrast that with this channel. How can you really tell whether I'm good or not? Now, notoriety in the academic world isn't always a one-to-one correspondence with goodness as a philosopher, but it's a safer bet than just finding someone who made a YouTube video on philosophy, because anybody can make these. You just need a camera. Fourth suggestion, listen to some philosophy podcasts. I think these are actually a little bit better than the YouTube videos in my experience, and I especially recommend The Partially Examined Life. Philosophy is so discussion based that watching a lecture, while good and useful, doesn't capture sort of the level of dialogue that I think is integral to being a philosopher. And The Partially Examined Life is one of my favorite podcasts for the reason that it exemplifies a dialogue and it goes through major thinkers and hits really interesting issues. And on that note, discussion is really vital. So it's one thing to watch other people's contents or watch other people's discussion, and that's good as far as it goes for helping you learn philosophy, but you're still not doing it. If you want to do philosophy, engage in it in everyday life. So just go to some of the issues that I talked about above, right? Epistemology and logic. Think about your levels of reasoning. Think about how you're acting and whether you ought to act in that way. Think about what it means to be a good friend. If you just stop a little bit and reflect on these like important central questions and being a human being, you'll be doing philosophy. And not only will you be doing philosophy, you'll be living a more well-examined and careful life. And that might even make your life better, which would be fantastic. And the other way to do this is to read and discuss those readings with people. So first pass, find some classic works in philosophy, read those. That will get you engaging with the material in a different way. And then the absolute best way is to read those materials with other people and then discuss them, see what they think. For standard starting points, there are a number of other lists out there on the internet you'll find, and some of them are pretty good. But I'm going to start Greek, ancient Greek, and I'm going Socrates, I'm going Plato, I'm going Aristotle. So I just grabbed two on my shelf that I think are great places for you to start. Plato's Symposium. I'm sure you can find free PDFs of this everywhere. You don't need to even buy a book. And then Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Incredible stuff. One of the reasons I like the Greek writings is they're classic, so you can expect everyone to have read them who has done academic philosophy. So that sort of brings you up to speed with some context that if you're watching lectures that other people have covered. And also that the contents that's central to these Greek pieces of writing are just really important central questions that you probably already care about. So I've mentioned it several times, right? But what is love? Does God exist? Things that you probably have already had to grapple with a little bit yourself. They're interesting, they're good, they're influential. Go to it. Okay, that's philosophy. I hope this video wasn't too meandering. I hope that listening to it, you get a little bit more context about what philosophy is and how I think about it and its major subdisciplines. In coming videos, we'll be a lot more focused. We'll do just a logic video, and then we can get into how that relates to inference and ontology. We'll do just an ethics video, and then we'll talk about how that relates to the sharing of people's data via LLMs, or how that relates to whether you can be mean to a chatbot, those sorts of questions, right? But we need to start with what philosophy is, then we'll get into those questions, and then we'll do some really practical, applied, and deep stuff, because the world of ontology and artificial intelligence is really rich philosophically. I hope you'll come along with me for the journey. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.